What if the man everyone called a saint, the one who built churches and gave generously to the needy, was hiding a horrifying secret? Behind his spotless caftan and holy smile, Deacon Adeyemi held a family tradition so dark it would ruin lives and shatter faith. But when Onyi, a virtuous young woman saving herself for marriage, gets tangled in his web, her decision to expose the truth will uncover the unthinkable and send shockwaves through an entire community. This is the story of betrayal, hidden rituals, and a warning that not everything in church is holy. Are you ready for the truth? It was a crisp Sunday morning, and the church was alive with activity. The choir sang beautifully, their voices like angels descending from heaven. Deacon Adeyemi walked in, radiating holiness. He was dressed immaculately in a white caftan that shone under the church lights. Everyone stood to greet him, whispering their admiration. "Deacon Adeyemi, the saint of our time," they whispered. He was an example of humility, generously donating to the church and funding numerous charitable projects. Everyone adored him. However, behind the public image of faith lay a dark secret, one that only his immediate family knew about. Deacon Adeyemi was not as he appeared. Under the outward appearance of a godly man, he was deeply rooted in the occult practices. His wealth and influence were the fruits of darkness, and his family bore the weight of his wicked traditions. Deacon Adeyemi had 3 sons named Akin, Toby, and Femi. His 2 older sons, Toby and Akin, had already married. Every woman in the church envied their wives, who were beautiful and cultured. But no one knew that these women had been forced to participate in a family ritual. They had to sleep with Deacon Adeyemi before their marriages could be blessed. It was a horrible act disguised as family tradition. Toby and Akin were aware of their father's demands but never questioned him. They viewed it as a necessary sacrifice to preserve the family's wealth and prestige. Femi, the youngest son, was different. He was deeply involved in church activities, genuinely kind, and appeared to have a heart for God. He knew about the family ritual but never spoke against it. Perhaps he hoped to avoid it when his time came. Onyi was a shining star at Emmanuel Gospel Church. Her beauty was magnetic. Smooth, dark skin, piercing eyes, and a smile that could brighten even the darkest room. She was also highly devoted, a young woman with a strong moral compass. "I'll wait for my Mr. Right," she frequently told her friends. "He must be God-fearing and successful. I've kept myself this long. I'm not going to settle for less." Onyi's mother, on the other hand, had a more realistic outlook. "God-fearing is good," she would say, "but wealth is also important, my daughter. You can't pray yourself out of hunger." Femi Adeyemi entered Onyi's life like a gentle breeze on a sweltering day. He was everything she had prayed for: handsome, kind, and deeply involved in the church. His quiet confidence and unwavering devotion to God drew her in. He wasn't just wealthy, he was the son of Deacon Adeyemi, the most revered man in the church. Their first conversation was after a Bible study session. Femi had approached her, his shy smile making her heart flutter. "Hi, Onyi," he said, his voice warm. "I've noticed you at the choir rehearsals. You sing beautifully." Onyi blushed. "Thank you, Femi. That means a lot." From that moment on, their connection deepened. Femi was attentive, thoughtful, and eager to share his world with her. He introduced her to the finer things in life: dinner at upscale restaurants, weekends at luxury resorts, and gifts that left her breathless. But what touched her most was his humility. Despite his privileged background, Femi never flaunted his wealth. Onyi's mother was overjoyed. "God has answered my prayers," she said. "You found a good man, my daughter." Onyi's friends were equally envious. "You hit the jackpot, Onyi," one of them said. "Femi is the whole package." For the first time, Onyi felt like her dreams were within reach. The first time Onyi stepped into the Adeyemi mansion, she felt like she had entered another world. The gates alone were an architectural marvel, and the house beyond them was a palace. Every corner of the mansion exuded wealth and sophistication. Deacon Adeyemi greeted her warmly, his smile wide but his eyes cold. "Welcome to our home, my dear," he said, extending his hand. "Femi has told us so much about you." Onyi felt a shiver run down her spine as their hands touched, but she dismissed it. This was her future father-in-law, after all. The dinner was lavish, the conversation polite. Lady Madup was gracious, though her laughter seemed forced. Toby and Akin's wives were present but distant, their eyes avoiding Onyi's. She wondered if they felt threatened by her presence. After dinner, Deacon Adeyemi addressed Femi. "Have you told her about the family rituals?" Onyi froze. "Rituals?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Femi looked uncomfortable. "Dad, I'll talk to her later." Deacon Adeyemi nodded, his gaze lingering on Onyi a moment too long. "Good. It's important she understands our traditions." Femi pulled Onyi aside that night, looking unusually serious. "There's something you need to know," he began. Onyi remained silent as Femi explained the family ritual. Her stomach swirled and her heartbeat quickened. "You're telling me I have to sleep with your father before we can get married?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's just a tradition," Femi explained, avoiding her gaze. "My brother's wives did it. It's not as bad as it sounds." Onyi's world shifted on its axis. The man she loved and trusted asked her to do the unthinkable. "Femi, how are you expecting me to agree to this? It is wrong." "I know it's hard," he said, his voice pleading, "but this is how my family works. Please, Onyi, if you love me, you'll do it." For weeks, Onyi wrestled with her decision. She prayed fervently, seeking clarity from God, but her heart remained heavy. She confided in her mother, who was horrified but hesitant to interfere. "Marriage is about sacrifice," her mother said cautiously. "But this, I don't know, Onyi. Be careful." Deacon Adeyemi and Femi continued to pressure her. The older man even offered her material incentives: a house in Banana Island, unlimited access to the family's private jet, and a bank account filled to the brim. "You'll be a queen, Onyi," Deacon Adeyemi said one evening. "All I ask is one night. It's a small price to pay for the life you'll have." Onyi felt trapped. Everywhere she turned, she was reminded of what she stood to gain and what she risked losing. Eventually, Onyi gave in. "I'll do it," she said, her voice hollow. The ritual took place in a secluded part of the mansion. Deacon Adeyemi was cold and clinical, treating her like a transaction. Onyi felt her soul shatter as the act unfolded. When it was over, she locked herself in the bathroom, sobbing until her throat was raw. She couldn't recognize herself anymore. The strong, faithful woman she had once been was gone, replaced by a hollow shell. The wedding was the talk of the town. Socialites, politicians, and church leaders attended the lavish ceremony. Onyi wore a gown fit for royalty, her smile hiding the pain that gnawed at her soul. But her marriage to Femi was a nightmare from the start. He refused to touch her, claiming he couldn't get past what had happened. "I thought I could handle it," he said one night, "but I can't." Instead, Femi sought comfort in the arms of other women. Onyi discovered his infidelity when she found messages on his phone. "She's just a trophy wife," he had texted his mistress. "You're the one I love." Onyi confronted him, but Femi was unapologetic. "You agreed to this," he said coldly. "Don't act like a victim now." Onyi fell into a deep depression. Her luxurious life felt like a prison. Her dreams turned to ashes. She had sacrificed everything: her purity, her dignity, her happiness, for a man who didn't love her and a family that had destroyed her. But then something shifted. Onyi realized she couldn't continue living like this. She had to take control of her life. Onyi began gathering evidence, recording conversations with Femi and Deacon Adeyemi. She reached out to Toby and Akin's wives, who reluctantly shared their own stories of abuse and manipulation. Armed with this evidence, Onyi went to the church pastor. She poured out her heart, showing him the recordings. The pastor was horrified and promised to address the matter publicly. The following Sunday, the church was packed. The pastor took the pulpit, his voice trembling as he spoke. "We have been deceived," he said. "The man we have trusted as a pillar of this church has betrayed us." The recordings were played, and the congregation erupted in shock and anger. Deacon Adeyemi's secrets were laid bare, his reputation destroyed in an instant. Deacon Adeyemi was excommunicated from the church and faced public disgrace. His family's wealth and influence crumbled as business partners and allies distanced themselves. Onyi had exposed the truth, but the scars of her experience lingered. The betrayal, the loss of her purity, and the collapse of her marriage left her feeling hollow. She moved into a modest apartment, far from the glitz and glamour of the Adeyemi estate. It was her sanctuary, a place where she could begin to rebuild herself. She threw herself into her work, channeling her pain into action. Onyi started a foundation called Voices Unbroken, dedicated to helping women escape abusive relationships and oppressive traditions. The foundation quickly gained traction, with women from all walks of life reaching out to share their stories. But at night, when the world was quiet, the memories would return. Onyi often woke up in tears, haunted by the rituals and the betrayal. Healing, she realized, was not a straight path. Femi's life unraveled after the church scandal. He moved out of the Banana Island mansion, unable to face the reminders of his shattered marriage. His business partnerships dissolved, and the women he had once entertained abandoned him. One night, after drinking himself into a stupor, Femi called Onyi. "I'm sorry," he slurred, his voice thick with regret. "I ruined everything." Onyi listened in silence, her heart heavy. She wanted to forgive him, but the wounds he had inflicted ran deep. "You didn't just ruin our marriage, Femi," she said softly. "You broke me." The call ended, and Onyi knew it was the last time she would hear from him. Femi faded into obscurity, a man weighed down by the consequences of his choices. Despite her pain, Onyi found purpose in her work. Voices Unbroken grew into a nationwide movement, giving women a platform to speak out against exploitation and abuse. Onyi became a prominent advocate, her story inspiring countless others. One day during a public event, a young woman approached her. "Thank you for sharing your story," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Because of you, I found the courage to leave my abusive husband." Onyi felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in years. Her suffering had not been in vain. It had birthed something meaningful. She still struggled with her faith, often questioning why God had allowed her to endure such pain. But over time, she found solace in the belief that her story was part of a greater plan. Her story became a beacon of hope for others, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is light. Not everyone in the church is who they claim to be. Be cautious, hold on to your values, and never sacrifice your soul for material gain. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.